Today we are diving into summer energetics. Now, whether you're in the Northern Hemisphere or Southern Hemisphere, at least once a year, you're experiencing summer. And summer kind of has like a different fingerprint, separate from winter or fall or spring. And while you can manifest at literally any time of the year, it's interesting how you can kind of use this cycle to help it cultivate your manifestation practice in a new way. There's a really good quote by Jill Winterstein of Spirit Daughter. She said, "The cycle of the sun represents the cycle of our lives and reflects the natural flow of energy moving inward and outward. There are times to grow, times to pause, times to shed, times to learn." Especially recent episodes we've had this year with Janelle, where she's talking about the integration period, like doubling down on a challenge, which we all just went through collectively as a community, and then having that integration period. Lacy, how do you sort of see summer as this energetic season, and what themes do you see come up?
What I love about manifestation and summer energy, summer to me represents a fire energy, which if I think about something I always say, just totally based on seeing so many clients, I'm like, Aries are the fastest manifestors. It feels like that kind of an energy where things can really speed up for you. Obviously, the summer has a lot of celestial things happening. But when I think about manifestation, when we're in winter, for instance, just like any traditional spirituality, paganism, cyclical living, it's so much about the death and inward and really, really taking that time to let the things go, clear the space, process. But what I love about summer energy is things are on fire, you manifest a lot faster. So if you're, this challenge we're doing, for instance, it's that inner child energy, it's that playfulness. Even if you have ebbs and flows of wherever you're at in the summer, even if it's a challenging summer for you, thank God you have this challenge, but it's also about reconnecting with that, right? You have these longer days representing just more space, time, and energy and light behind everything you're doing. And then you also have that fire energy, that beneath you, behind you, pushing you. So when I think about summer energy, I'm thinking about sexual energy. I'm thinking, and it doesn't have to be literal, but it is that like Kundalini energy, that creative energy, dreaming, like you have such big dreams in the summer. Anything's possible. You're feeling into that light space. So when I think of manifestation in summer, I think it's a really, really active time, whereas it's such an internal time of clearing space, letting go. In the winter, this is your time to really get into that inner child energy, especially what we're working on here and healing the wound, like taking that core wound through things and putting that momentum behind it to really watch what can show up for you after summer and manifest. So I love summer energy. I'm somebody who has to live by the ocean no matter what, or a river. It's like a strict of mine. I've figured that out. And so for me, summer represents like you're going down to the beach, you're in that ocean energy, you're hanging out more, you're hanging out later, you're having bigger dreams. It's that time of playfulness and playing tricks on things and mystery. To me, that's that sexual energy, that falling in love energy. And like we always say, love and money is always really connected, which no matter what you're manifesting, they are connected to that. Even if you're manifesting during this challenge, a better relationship with yourself, there's something there connected to love, right? The love space. So really that midsummer energy represents those beautiful balance. So whatever your wound is, you're taking through this challenge, really, really harness this energy and let this be wherever you're at. Even if you are in the Southern Hemisphere and you are in an internal state, also let this work for you, that challenge in that way. What about you? How do you see it, Jessica? Especially as an East Coaster, you guys like really come out of hibernation.
I know. Well, it's so interesting because I also think of how like what your programming and memory around the seasons are, right? So like if I think of winter as a child, that was like magic. That was like, oh, cool, like Santa's coming, that I get to be with family, time off from school, but the hibernation of being inside because the snow and it's so cold and it's so inward and like cozy up and cover up and sweaters and jackets and all the things. And then summer to me is like the explosion of the outdoors, or almost the merging with the outdoors in so many ways. Like I just remember being outside as many hours as I could. And it's interesting, even this past spring, like walking through LA and watching different flowers bloom. I'm like, oh yeah, my mom used to take me on walks around like my grandma's house and our house, and she'd point out like, those are the lilacs. Do you smell them? Like, look at the colors. Like we would do like a little nature trail walk. And it's like this witnessing of this rebirth that kind of comes up and you get to merge with it. And I think there also is something about symbolically the sun as this spotlight. It's like it's out longer, it's out, the colors feel richer. I mean, during golden hour, it's just like the coolest colors outside, and sunset is so gorgeous. And I think metaphorically or symbolically, it's the same thing. Like the spotlight's on you to allow yourself to feel seen. All the work that you've been doing over the past year, all the unblocking, it's like allow what is crystallized. Like it's like allow it to be birthed and in the sun and experiencing the elements and all of the things. Especially we're in such a digital age where people are like glued to their phones or their laptops or whatever. It's like, let's reconnect with the roots of like every tradition under the sun since the beginning of time, which is like having those outdoor rituals and being connected, and allow yourself, like, where do you not feel comfortable to be seen and put yourself out there? You know, like where are you not just jumping in that lake or pool? You know, invite yourself to do that. Like acknowledge the growth. You don't have to push anything, like accept exactly where you are and be seen in that.
Yeah, I love that. It also makes me think too, like getting back into that sexual energy or that pleasure energy. Again, this is metaphorical. This is the bees with the flowers, you know, that are happening. But think about stone fruit, right? It's just summer's so juicy. Things are juicy. And when we were kids, and in that inner child, of course, depending on what our situation was growing up, but had we have been having a healthy parented experience or caretaker experience, you're barefoot, you're in a juicy energy, you're in an imaginative energy at all times. Like, how can we really bring that into our practice during this challenge, into our DIs? You know, and I even think about, like, this is like hypersexual metaphorical, but Call Me by Your Name, that movie, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but to me that represents like the epitome of summer, like summering, and like watching him come into his like truly authentic self, and in such an adolescent childhood experience, and everything is so juicy and watery and explorative and creative. And again, I don't want to focus on like sexuality. I'm letting that be a representation of, like you were saying, spring is the rebirth, you know, and summer's like the digging into all of the pleasures of life. And that's really what children do. That's their whole existence. It's exploration, imagination, total presence, and completely digging into all of this, the sensory of life.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting too, because if you think about the unblocking work and going in, there was a stat that I found recently of when you're in really present play, it's like you're in a hypnotic state. And so that can super speed creating new neural pathways in those moments. Like if you're playing soccer, or like just running around in the backyard, or, you know, some game in the pool or whatever it is, it can super speed creating new neural pathways. So it's like if you have this concentrated effort of unblocking through the challenge, and then you take the time to intentionally play, like let yourself be in that authentic energy, you can really super speed some of your manifestation process too.
Love that. That's awesome.
Magnetism, joy in nature. Yeah, really the juiciness too of the authenticity. It's like, what do you authentically crave? Like what speaks to you during this time? Is it campfire? Is it being in nature? Is it being barefoot? I always yell at Daniel because he is forever barefoot wherever we go. He's always trying to take his shoes off. And I'm like, maybe not the staircase in Silver Lake. Like, let's not do that. And he's like, it's fine. It's nature. I'm like, it's not that clean, but that's fine. But he really needs to be in the woods somewhere. But, you know, is it lemonade? Is it barbecue? Is it like the smell of suntan lotion? Like, what are those things that really bring you joy and feel like authentic, connected to you? And I also want to make note for anyone who's like, God, if I think back to my childhood memories of summer, like maybe there's a lot of loneliness, you know, maybe my parents work full time and I was stuck at home, or like, you know, maybe there was like traumatic events that took place in the summer, things that don't feel that good. You have the opportunity to rewrite it now. Like you get to honor your inner child. You get to go out there and celebrate it the way that you always wanted to. You get to give yourself the childhood you always wanted to.
Or that your authentic self has always needed. Like that's what this moment is for.
Yes. It's so, so healing. Like, I feel like I think back, even the past few years, every summer, my magnetic self feels the calmest to be seen mostly during that season over any other, I feel like.
Gosh, I have to think back if that's my case as well. I feel like I find it in all of the seasons, oddly. Like I have periods of time, but the summer has always been for me the ultimate representation of my authentic self. Even though I'm someone who actually hates heat, there's something about the freedom of it and, mirroring inner child, like Daniel, like being barefoot, saltwater hair, so connected to nature. And my authentic self, though, I had, great periods of nature because I grew up on a ranch, but when I was with my mom in the suburbs, I was like playing video games inside of an AC house all day. You know what I mean? Like I've had to do a lot of reparenting around that. That's not my authentic self at all. I even can remember vividly sitting with my cousins were like my siblings because I lived with them 3 days a week. And all they wanted to do was play video games in the AC. I didn't even like video games really, with the exception of, Sega and like Lion King. I remember I'm like really dating myself. And they loved pizza. And I was one of those kids who grew up like loving salmon and ravioli. Like I liked real food. And I remember having to pretend to like those things. It wasn't authentic to me at all in order to fit in, with their friends at their house. So yeah, I love that you said like that this is your time to really touch in who is your authentic inner child while you're going through this core wound and taking it, examining it from all of these different angles. Like it's just such a beautiful kind of transcendental state that you get to look at your authentic self and inner child, that the summer reflects on it, kind of like, microdosing. Like you're saying, the colors are richer, everything's juicy, everything's warm. It's this time that can just like super speed that process and let you tap in and really get in there.
Yeah, so kind of paint that picture too, Lacy. Like, what were some of the things that you picked up in childhood, whether they were connected to your authenticity during the summer or not? And then what are practices, like how did you go about incorporating some of those practices now to create that summer, especially with Teddy too?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had really the all-American like summers. It was chlorine pools, it was AC houses, TV all the time. And I'm thinking like earlier adolescence a little bit, especially growing up in the Central Valley and Sierras. It's so hot, like over the hundreds often. So it was just like that was the deal, and you enjoyed the mornings and the evenings. But I'll never forget that when I felt the most authentic was when I would be at my grandparents' house. And I can still remember the sound of my grandpa's sprinkler waking me up. And then he'd get up to do all of his farm chores and go check on the chickens and feed them and take the eggs and stuff around the ranch. I can remember the iced tea they would make and us sitting on the porch together and really that idyllic feeling. And it's so fascinating because I grew up when I was in that town, Mariposa, next to the like most gorgeous river ever. It's all the fresh snowmelt from Yosemite. And we like hardly ever went there. It was crazy. And we, even in the winter, we go there every day with Teddy and I and Max. When we're there, we were just there for 4 days and we hit the river every day. And so I can also vividly remember when I went to, I don't know how to say that store, but La Ton or whatever, they made the shea butter with lavender, but they had fresh lavender hanging for the first time I had ever seen it in person. Because I grew up not even like, all I ever ate were supermarket apples. Like I'd never been to a farmer's market but I didn't have access to that because we were like so all-American Central Valley. But I remember seeing the lavender hanging, and it just like my imagination, maybe the witchiness inside of me or the Euro curious inside of me being like, I want that summer. Like I want to know what that's like. That came from a garden, that came from France. And it's like such a silly chain, but in my mind, that's how my creativity was running. I was like, when I'm older, that's what I'm going to do. That was my authentic self. And it's fascinating because when I did manifest my ex-partner, like down to a T, the list, I talk about this all the time with him, his mom was Parisian. And so we got to spend 2 summers, one in Corsica, France, and one in Brittany. And when we were in Corsica, it was that. You were at the farmer's market. You were getting the salt with all of the herbs. So we were staying in a medieval house right above the ocean. It's kind of like Topanga. You drive down 2 miles and get to the ocean. It was funny when Garance was on the podcast and came here to record. I was like, Topanga always reminds me of Corsica because you're up in the mountains in these old houses and then you cruise down the mountains to go to the ocean. And it's funny because, I mean, at that time I was 27, so I was aware of this work and doing it. But before I had mastered it, I was like already reparenting myself and manifesting those experiences because they were so authentic to me. And like walking around with the French woven bat, you know, to go to the market, it was like, that is my authentic self. It has always been. I always say this, my ex's mom was probably my biggest expander to touch me into those points. Like, and when I'm often doing reparenting, when we did our challenge, what was it, 2 years ago when we released the safety eye for the first time. And I did that for the first time. And we all put the pictures of our safe place look like. And mine was that. It was French and Scotland and the food and the water and the greenery and the nature. And so it's funny how we have this opportunity that Summer's highlighting to really, really touch in with that, with our authentic selves.
And I just want to highlight to anyone, like, if you feel disconnected from that dream or that authenticity of your summer, like Lacy is such a perfect example of, like, she didn't have that. She didn't have that expansion. She had a very opposite experience, and she intentionally chose to connect, to expand, to unblock, aligned action, to fill her life and make that her reality. Because I think so many times people think like, oh yeah, that's a dream that like only someone else could have, you know, but that's your, if you feel drawn to that, like I even think of Pinterest. I make like mood boards all the time. And whenever I make my seasonal summer ones, I'm like lemon and oysters and crisp pool and, you know, blue tiles and whatever it is. Those little things that just like hit your soul in a certain way, like that's your authenticity. And if your life doesn't look like that, you can create it. Like this work is the opportunity to actually make it a reality. It's almost like don't just brush it off that that's some fantasy or that sounds great or traveling to Europe in the summer sounds great. It's like if that is what is like in your soul that lights you up and like feels so good and nourishing to you, like it's almost you have a obligation to yourself to go seek that out and use the work to connect with it.
And maybe you grew up, you know, the person listening to this with like really unstable hippie nomadic parents, and that was really unstable to your inner child. Maybe you're craving the opposite experience that feels, you know, much more safe. So just highlighting, like, let this challenge and let this summer bring your authenticity out. We're programmed in so many different ways, especially in social media right now, what our summer should look like. It absolutely should not look like that. Our summer should look like what our authentic self needs, craves, wants, especially our authentic inner child. That is what's going to contribute to our magnetism.
1000%.